What's up, everybody? Welcome back to 7th grade science. Today, we are going to move from talking about food chains, which we talked about last time, to food webs. They're very similar. If you felt confident on food chains, you'll feel confident on food webs. You'll see why in just a minute. So up here, I just want you to take a quick look at what we wrote for you. Food webs show how food chains in a community are interconnected and how energy flows in an ecosystem using arrows. It's not that different from the food chain. The food web just can have a lot of different connections. You can see this. It looks a lot more complicated than our chains, and it is more complicated. Frogs, for example, are eating multiple things, being eaten by something else. If you look right up here, tons of arrows in and out of the frog. We're going to learn how to break that down today. So, started out with a few things filled in. I want you all to be writing these things. By the time I'm done talking, it'll be about a minute. You should have these notes taken down here. If you need to pause for more time, pause right now and write them, and then be ready to listen to me, all right? All right. Now that we are back from being paused, if you chose to, I'm going to talk about what we see here. So in the food chain example, I took one little piece of the web and showed you how it can look just like a chain that we used to worked on last time. I'm going to be tracing the exterior of it with my mouse. It's this flower, caterpillar, and frog. I chose the lower right corner to make it easy to see. This is just a food chain like we know from our last class. This is the dandelion. The dandelion is a producer. It gets its energy from the sun. It is consumed by or gives its energy to the caterpillar. The caterpillar gives its energy to the frog. That's where I ended my chain. That's all we did last time. We learned that food chains are connections in ecosystems, and the arrows show how energy flows. Today, we're just going to make it a little more complicated. So we're moving down. This is still review. I listed that the autotrophs and producers are wheat, clover, and the dandelion. Remember, a producer is anything that creates its own food. They use the sun. Here's the dandelion. Here's the clover. Here's the wheat. Quick tip for you all. Often on test problems, you can identify your producers because they only have arrows coming out of them. Look right here. Wheat, no arrows going into it. Clover, no arrows going into it. Dandelion, no arrows going into it. They usually don't include the sun in these diagrams, so producers can easily be found because they only have arrows out, no arrows pointing at them, all right? So those are our three producers, wheat, clover, dandelion. They're in our bottom. Next, to save us time, instead of having you write caterpillar, frog, snake, mouse, rabbit, owl, hawk, and grasshopper, I just wrote all animals in the heterotrophs or consumers area. Remember, these are organisms that consume other organisms for their food. So the snake consumes or gets its energy from the frog. The snake is a carnivore because it eats another animal. Let's trace back until we don't see any more carnivores. Here's a frog. The frog is a carnivore because it gets its energy from the caterpillar. Caterpillar is an insect, but it's still an animal. Let's trace back again. Is the caterpillar a carnivore? It gets its energy from the dandelion, so no. The caterpillar here is not a carnivore, it's an herbivore. So all of our heterotrophs or consumers here are eating other animals, and all animals are heterotrophs in this example. Next, and this is where today really gets a little more interesting, we're talking about changes in food webs. So our first question says, what happens if rabbits decrease? Before we can answer how rabbits going away from the ecosystem would impact it, let's just understand how rabbits are connected. Let's find our rabbit. Right here, let's take stock of all the lines coming in and out of the rabbit. There's a line from the clover to the rabbit, and there's two lines out of the rabbit, to the owl and to the hawk. Let's reuse that in words that we know because we learned them last time. So what goes into the rabbit? Please write with me, clover, eaten by rabbit. The clover gives energy to the rabbit, or the rabbit eats the clover. We know that. Now, what eats the rabbit? The owl gets energy from the rabbit, and the hawk gets energy from the rabbit. So, owl, comma, hawk, eat rabbit. This is how I want you to break it down. Every time you do one of these problems, I want you to break it down exactly like this. The clover is eaten by the rabbit. The owl and the hawk eat the rabbit. Now, our question says, what happens if rabbits decrease? If our rabbits leave the ecosystem, what will be impacted? We already identified what will be impacted. I just highlighted it. Those are the three things: the clover, the owl, and the hawk. They're the connected ones. We have to tell how they'll be impacted. But it's easy if you follow my method. So we said the clover is eaten by the rabbit. The rabbit disappears. There's nothing left to eat the clover. It would be like if you ate Apple Jacks every morning and you stopped eating breakfast. There'd be more Apple Jacks in the world because you aren't eating 3 bowls a morning. That's exactly like the clover and the rabbit. So type with me. Clover would increase, right? The rabbit used to eat clover. The rabbit's gone. It can't eat the clover anymore. There's going to be more clover. Now, we're about to flip that. We see here, we've already identified the clover. We're good there, but we have to talk about the owl and we have to talk about the hawk. The owl and the hawk get their dinner by eating the rabbit. All of a sudden, the owl and the hawk don't have dinner anymore. They're finding hard to get food. They're going to start dying off. Type or write with me. The owl and hawk would decrease. The owl and hawk would go down. Their dinner, the rabbit, is gone. The owl and the hawk, they will go down. All right, I'm going to scroll down a little bit. The next question asks us, what would happen if snakes increase? What would happen if snakes increase? I want you to pause the video. Use my method. Find the snake. Write out what eats, or what does the snake eat, and what eats the snake. Then try to understand if the snake population went up or increased, not decreased, it increases, what would happen to the snakes? Go ahead and pause. We're going to come back together and talk about these. All right, now that you are back from the break, hopefully you paused and gave it a shot. If you didn't, please go back. Predicting is one of the keys to understanding. If you predict before you learn, research shows us you learn so much more. So go back if you didn't predict, give me predictions, and then come back. All right. So what would happen if the snakes increase? Let's write out the relationships. I find my snake. Lots of arrows from the snake. I'm just going to start with this arrow and keep moving around. I see an arrow from the mouse to the snake. That means the mouse is eaten by the snake. So go ahead and write that. The mouse is eaten by the snake, right? It gives its energy to the snake. Let's keep moving this way. We're moving over, moving over. Here's another arrow. Arrow going into the snake. That means the snake eats this thing. That is the frog. So I'm going to write frog eaten by snake. The mouse and the frog are eaten by the snake. Now we have 2 arrows going out of the snake. Arrow going out of the snake to the owl tells us the owl gets its energy from the snake, or the owl eats the snake. Type with me. Owl eats snake. There's one more. See if we can figure this one out before I even get there. This arrow comes from the snake. Trace it along to the hawk. That means the hawk eats the snake. All right. We're going to scroll down a little bit more. The food web hopefully won't get too cut off. All right. So what we have here, we have to analyze the same way we know how. We know that the mouse was eaten by the snake and the frog was eaten by the snake. Now our snake population increases. It goes up. So if the mouse and the frog were dinner for the snake, all of a sudden there's a lot more snakes. They need a lot more dinner. That means mouse and frog decrease. They go down. There's more dinner. They need to be eaten. Their population decreases because there are more snakes. Just be like if we cloned you 5 times and you still ate 3 bowls of Apple Jacks every morning, all of a sudden your clones are eating 15 bowls of Apple Jacks every morning. The amount of Apple Jacks are going to go down. So is the mouse and the frog. I think you can predict from here, but I'm still going to talk through it. The owl eats the snake and the hawk eats the snake. If we have more snakes, we have more dinner for the owl and the hawk. If we have more dinner for the owl and the hawk, they are much more able to survive and reproduce. So type or write with me, owl and hawk increase. Anytime you do one of these problems, before you try to answer it, you have to do this section. You have to write out the relationships because I guarantee you will confuse yourself. Even if you think you're getting these right, when it comes to the CA, when it comes to STAR, write down your annotations. It will save you heartache getting some problems incorrectly. There's a final box on your organizer that I'm not going to go over. It says, what would happen if all producers die? You can fill that in if you want. I'm going to give you a hint on that. If you want to push yourself, you really should fill it in. Remember, producers are the base. They're all right here. The producers is where the whole web starts. I want y'all, once you're done watching the video, give me a prediction. If the base of this web falls apart, what might happen? All right? If you need to rewind, see any part of the video, you should do that. Otherwise, take a look up on the board. It'll have your instructions for your next activity.